The text came on a gray Tuesday afternoon. Family dinner Friday. Mom's making your favorite. Be there at 6. It looked harmless, a short line in the family group chat sent by my brother Evan. Within minutes, everyone had replied with heart emojis and can't wait and save me a slice of pie. I saw the notifications roll in and stared at my phone for a full hour before typing a simple, okay. No one acknowledged it. That was normal. In my family, silence wasn't rude, it was hierarchy. The successful spoke. The struggling listened. I leaned back in my office chair, the skyline of downtown Portland glittering through the glass. My reflection hovered over the numbers on my screen: 94.3 million active users across 127 countries, revenue up 28% quarter-over-quarter, server capacity holding steady at 74%. Everything was functioning like a heartbeat. My company InsightWave has become one of the fastest-growing AI platforms in the world. 7 years ago, it had been a dream built on an $8,000 loan and a second-hand laptop. Now investors called me a visionary, but to my family I was still the girl playing business on the internet. That's what Friday dinners were about, subtle ways of reminding me I was the outlier. The rest of them fit together like matching silverware. My father, a retired economics professor who believed in pensions and predictability. My mother, a homemaker, turned community volunteer who measured love in home-cooked meals and gentle worry. Evan, my older brother, a managing director at a major investment bank in Seattle. Laura, my sister, a high-profile attorney whose name often appeared in business magazines under Women of Influence. They were the Morrison family success story, and then there was me. When I told Dad I wanted to study computer science, he'd said, "Technology is a tool, not a career. Find something solid like accounting." Mom had softened it. "He just wants you to be safe, sweetheart." But the message was the same. Dream smaller. I didn't. I dropped out of college to build my first startup. It failed within a year. Then another one failed. The third time, I stopped telling them what I was doing. By Friday, the rain had settled over the city in a steady curtain of silver. I drove my 6-year-old Subaru through familiar streets toward my parents' house, a place that always smelled faintly of cinnamon and nostalgia. Evan's BMW and Laura's Audi were already in the driveway, gleaming like trophies. My car looked like an afterthought beside them, and maybe that's exactly what I was. Mom opened the door before I could knock. "Emma," she said, beaming, "you look thin. Are you eating enough?" "I'm fine, Mom." "You work too hard on that computer thing," she said, ushering me in. "You need balance." "Sure," I murmured, handing her the flowers I'd brought. Dad was in the living room, the glow of the evening news flickering across his glasses. Evan and Laura were at the kitchen island with glasses of wine mid-laughter, the kind of laughter people share when they feel safe being the center of attention. "The startup founder has arrived," Evan called as I walked in. His voice carried that familiar edge, teasing on the surface, dismissive underneath. "How's the small shop?" "Still online, or did you open a kiosk at the mall?" Laura smirked, sipping her wine. "Be nice, Evan. She's serious about her little tech project." "I'm not mocking," Evan said, though his grin said otherwise. "I think it's great she has hobbies." "It's not a hobby," I said quietly. "It's my company." "Right, your company," he echoed, making air quotes. "How many employees now? 3, 4? I didn't answer. He chuckled. "Hey, that's impressive for a side hustle." Mom called us to dinner before I had to respond. The table looked exactly as it always did. Candles, roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, her famous apple pie cooling on the counter. The kind of warmth that somehow always made me feel colder. So Emma Dad began carving his chicken with precision. "Your mother says you're still working on that analytics project." "Been what, 5 years now?" "7, I said. He raised his brows. "And it's sustainable." "I'm doing fine." Evan laughed softly. "Fine. That's always your word. Fine doesn't mean successful, Em. It means surviving." "Evan, Mom said, don't start." "I'm just asking," he said innocently. "How does it work?" "You sell ads." "No. We build AI models that predict consumer behavior for businesses. They pay subscription fees based on usage." Laura leaned forward. And how many companies actually pay for this? Hundreds, I said. Hundreds, she repeated, skepticism sharpening every syllable. What kind of companies? Various industries, retail, healthcare, tech. Can you name any? I can't disclose clients. NDAs. That's convenient, she said. The silence that followed was the same one I'd grown up with, polished, polite, filled with judgment. Dad cleared his throat. You know, if you wanted to transition into something more stable, I could connect you with a few people at the university. They're hiring for research staff. Thanks, I said, but I'm not looking. Evan smiled over his glass of Cabernet. Still chasing the unicorn, huh? I met his eyes. Still counting other people's money. His grin faltered for half a second before he laughed it off. Touché. Mom sighed. Can we not fight for one meal? We're not fighting, I said softly. Just comparing definitions of success. That earned me a small laugh from Dad. Well, maybe one day we'll see you on the news. Then we'll know you've made it. I smiled at that, not because it was funny, but because I knew something they didn't. Later, while Mom served pie, I checked my phone beneath the table. My inbox flashed with a new message from Bloomberg Business feature approved publishing next week. I set the phone down and looked around the table at the family that measured worth in salaries and titles, at the people who saw my silence as defeat instead of strategy. They had no idea that in 3 days, the world would call me what they never had: a founder. Evan was talking about his year-end bonus. Laura was debating a legal precedent. Dad was commenting on market inflation. I took another bite of pie, tasted the cinnamon, and smiled quietly. Because the next time my name appeared on their TV, it wouldn't be as the little sister who never settled. It would be as the woman who built something from nothing while they were too busy talking to notice. I didn't argue. I didn't correct them. I'd learned that silence could be a weapon sharper than words. Outside, snow began to fall soft and steady against the kitchen window. Inside, my father raised his glass. To my family, he said. I raised mine too. To perspective. They laughed politely, not catching the double meaning. That was fine. They didn't have to understand, not yet. When I drove home that night, the city lights shimmered on the wet pavement like data points scattered across a map. My phone buzzed again, another message from Bloomberg confirming the interview schedule. I smiled to myself, the quiet hum of the car blending with the rain. And as I turned into the empty street leading to my apartment, I whispered it aloud, not as anger and as truth. Silence isn't weakness, I said. It's preparation. The next morning I woke before sunrise, the gray light spilling through my blinds like static. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and stared at the empty document I'd meant to fill with notes for Monday's investor call. Instead, I saw the reflection of my own face on the screen, tired, detached, and carrying the faintest trace of last night's dinner. Family dinners were supposed to make you feel rooted. Mine only made me feel invisible. The quiet of my apartment was almost medicinal after the noise of home. Here, nothing demanded explanation. The humming from my servers was steady like breathing. My team had logged in hours earlier from different time zones: Singapore, Berlin, Toronto. Messages flickered across Slack: deployment updates, code merges, bug reports. A world I had built running on trust and logic, not assumptions. No one here asked if what I did was real. Still, the echo of Evan's laughter lingered. How will you ever pay rent? That line, delivered with a grin and the approval of everyone around the table, had hit deeper than he could imagine. Because it wasn't just about money. It was about being seen as legitimate, as equal. I thought about when that started, when I stopped being part of the Morrison narrative and became its footnote. I was 12 when I built my first website. Nothing fancy, just a page that cataloged all of Mom's recipes, so she wouldn't lose the handwritten cards she kept in an old metal box. I'd spent weeks teaching myself HTML from library books. When I showed it to Dad, proud and jittery, he'd said, "That's nice, honey, but maybe next time you should build something useful." I laughed it off then. Kids are used to dismissal, it rolls off like rain. But it stayed with me. Every "that's nice" turned into a tiny scar. Evan was 17 then, captain of the debate team Golden Boy with a scholarship on the horizon. Laura was already in college sending home essays that Mom read aloud at the table. I was the quiet one in the corner, the one they called the brainy sister, in a way that didn't sound like a compliment. When other kids had posters of bands or movie stars, my wall had lines of code printed on paper. "You need to talk more," Mom used to say. "People can't appreciate you if they don't hear you." She was wrong. I learned early that people don't hear what doesn't fit their expectations. By the time I turned 20, I'd built my second startup, a small analytics dashboard for local retailers. I was working 18-hour days out of a one-bedroom apartment, surviving on ramen and caffeine. When I told Dad about it, he'd smiled and said, "That's nice, Emma. Have you thought about applying for a real job while you're still young? A real job." Those words had defined the invisible wall between us. It wasn't malice. They didn't want to hurt me. They just didn't understand a world where ambition didn't wear a suit. To them, success was something you could print on a resume. To me, it was something you built in silence. The more they doubted me, the quieter I became. It wasn't surrender, it was survival. Every laugh, every sigh, every "maybe it's time to move on," taught me to retreat deeper into my work. My company became my language, my argument, my proof. And now, as the city woke below my window, I realized that was the trade I'd made: connection for conviction. A Slack notification broke my thoughts. "Ben, head of engineering. Server optimization complete. Latency down by 20%. Also, congrats on the Bloomberg thing. The article's going to be huge." I typed back, "Thanks. Keep it quiet until it's live." He replied with a smile emoji. Simple. No skepticism, no backhanded questions. Just faith in the work. I closed my laptop and poured another coffee. Through the window, the rain had turned to snow, a rare Portland snowfall, soft and tentative. My mind drifted back to the one person who had always believed in me without fully understanding how. My mother. She wasn't cruel like the others. Her doubt came wrapped in love. "I just worry," she used to say. "You're smart, but the world is hard. I don't want you to get crushed trying to do something impossible." I used to wish she'd see that I wasn't breaking, I was building. But love and fear often look the same from the outside. When I was 23 and my second company failed, Mom had driven 3 hours to pick me up. I remember sitting in her car, boxes of equipment piled in the back, my eyes hollow from exhaustion. She'd said softly, "Maybe this is the universe telling you to rest." But I didn't rest. I rebuilt it. The same night I moved into that tiny apartment, I opened a new folder on my laptop and typed a name at the top of the screen: Project Insight Wave. It wasn't ambition that pushed me anymore. It was necessity. I couldn't go back to being the one who tried. I had to become the one who finished. The sound of my phone snapped me back. A calendar reminder. Christmas dinner. 1 week away. I stared at it for a long time. Part of me wanted to cancel. But another part, the one that had spent years being underestimated, wanted to show up. To sit at that same table in that same house and say nothing. Because soon the silence wouldn't mean invisibility. It would mean restraint. The world was about to know who I was. And they'd find out the same way everyone does in the digital age, through a headline. Still, there was something unsettling about it. Revenge, even poetic, never filled the space left by neglect. What I wanted wasn't payback. It was an acknowledgement. A simple, "We were wrong about you." But I knew better than to expect that. People who build their worth on certainty rarely admit when they miscalculated. My phone buzzed again. This time it was from an unknown number. "Ms. Lawson, this is Harper Reed from Bloomberg. Final confirmation for your interview next Wednesday. We'd love to get a few personal reflections, your background, early influences, challenges." I stared at the message, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Early influences. How was I supposed to explain that my biggest motivator had been the absence of belief? That every "you can't" became a blueprint for "I will." I typed, "Happy to discuss the company's evolution." Personal reflections are complicated. She replied instantly. Complicated makes good television. I smiled despite myself. They always wanted the story, the drama, the headline that made triumph sound like a miracle instead of a decade of quiet persistence. As the day faded into night, I sat back and looked around my apartment, the same one-bedroom where it all began. The desk was scarred with coffee rings. The whiteboard is full of equations. The small potted plant that somehow survived every all-nighter. In this room I had failed twice, cried countless times, and rebuilt everything that mattered. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Outside, the snow thickened, covering the street below in white. The city felt muted, wrapped in silence, the same kind of silence I'd grown to trust. I turned off the lights, letting the glow from my monitors fill the room. The reflection in the screens stared back at me, the same face my family saw, but this time I saw it differently. Not as the quiet one, not as the failure they couldn't categorize, but as the woman who had learned to turn doubt into data and rejection into revolution. Tomorrow the world would still see me as invisible. For a little while longer, that was fine. Tonight, I needed to show up one last time as the invisible sister ready for the reveal. The rain was a steady curtain of silver over the city. Mom's house looked exactly the same, warm lights spilling from the windows, the faint smell of roasted chicken drifting out. I parked my old Subaru beside Evan's gleaming BMW and Laura's silver Audi. My car looked like the poor cousin no one wanted to claim. When Mom opened the door, her face lit up. "Emma, you're early. Come in before you freeze." The warmth hit instantly, the hum of conversation, clinking glasses, the faint soundtrack of a holiday playlist. Evan was in the kitchen, tie loosened, wine glass in hand. "Look who made it," he called, grinning. "The internet entrepreneur herself." Laura laughed softly. "Still doing that analytics thing? Still." I said evenly, setting my bag down. "That's adorable," she said. "At least you're consistent." Mom shot her a look. "Be nice, Laura." Evan raised his hands. "Hey, I'm just curious. So, Emma, how's business? Still running your little company from that apartment?" I smiled faintly. "It's doing fine." "Fine," he repeated. "That's always your word. Fine. But fine doesn't mean profit, does it?" I didn't answer. I'd learned long ago that explaining anything only made it worse. At dinner, Dad sat at the head of the table, carving the chicken with surgical precision. "Your mother says you're still working on that AI project," he said. "That's been what, 5 years? 7, I said. 7. He frowned. "And you're still able to support yourself?" Evan chuckled. "She's doing fine, Dad." "She told you?" Laura sipped her wine. "You know my firm's hiring product analysts. They'd love someone with your background. Something stable with benefits." "I already have benefits," I said. Evan leaned forward. "Health insurance? Retirement plan?" "Yes." "How much in retirement? Enough." He smirked. "Enough isn't a number." Mom sighed. "Can we not do this tonight?" "It's fine," I said quietly. "They're just curious." "Oh, come on," Evan said, grinning. "We're family. We can be honest." "Honest?" I asked. "Yeah. You're 30 and still living in a one-bedroom apartment. Still driving that Subaru from college. Still working on this project. We're just worried." Laura nodded. "We want you to be secure." "I am secure." Evan laughed. "Sure. Until the internet crashes." The table laughed lightly. I didn't. Inside, something small cracked, but I kept my voice even. "I appreciate your concern." Dad cleared his throat. "Emma, have you thought about what happens if this doesn't work out?" I looked at him, at all of them. "Every day," I said. The table went quiet for a moment. Then Laura reached for her wine again. "Well, at least you're realistic." I smiled faintly. "More than you think." Mom tried to change the subject, asked about Evan's promotion, Laura's new case. The laughter returned, easy and bright. I sat there silent, watching them talk over each other like a scene I'd already lived 100 times. Then halfway through dessert, the TV from the living room cut through the chatter. "Breaking news tonight," the anchor's voice said crisp and clear. "Seattle-based InsightWave has just announced the close of its Series D funding round, valuing the AI analytics firm at over $4.2 billion. The sound of forks stopped. On screen, my photo appeared, headshot navy blazer, smile steady. The company's founder and CEO, 30-year-old Emma Lawson, the anchor continued. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Evan froze. Laura blinked rapidly. Has transformed how global companies understand customer behavior. With more than 900 enterprise clients and nearly $800 million in annual revenue. The anchor kept talking, but no one breathed. Dad's voice broke the silence. That's you. I set down my fork. Yes. Evan stared, pale. You said you had company. I do. You said it was small. You assumed it was small. No one spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the TV, my name echoing through the room. The table was finally silent, not because I had lost the argument, but because the truth glowing on the television screen had finally spoken for me. No one moved. The only sound in the room was the faint hum of the refrigerator and the muffled voice of the TV anchor fading into a commercial. I could feel every heartbeat in the silence. The air itself seemed heavier, like the house was holding its breath with us. Dad still had the remote in his hand, frozen mid-air, his knuckles white. Mom's eyes were glossy, her lips parted like she was about to say something but couldn't form the words. Evan finally broke the stillness. That can't be right. His voice cracked somewhere between disbelief and panic. It's Emma that's not real. It can't be. It is, I said quietly. Laura looked up from her phone, her face pale. It's on every site. Bloomberg, CNBC, Reuters, they're all reporting it. Her thumb scrolled frantically. Your company InsightWave Series D funding led by SoftBank valued $4.2 billion. Jesus. Mom covered her mouth with both hands. Oh my God. Dad slowly lowered himself back into his chair. $4 billion. 4.2, I corrected. The number hung in the air like thunder that hadn't quite struck yet. Evan blinked hard, rubbing his temples. How long have you known? About 6 weeks. 6 weeks? He let out a short, incredulous laugh. You've known for 6 weeks that you're what? A billionaire? And you didn't say anything. I met his eyes. Would you have believed me? He opened his mouth and closed it again. No sound came out. Laura was still scrolling her face, shifting through disbelief, shock, and something that looked a lot like regret. You're everywhere, she whispered. They're calling you the woman who made AI human. I took a slow breath. That's marketing. But it's flattering. Dad's gaze hadn't left the screen. You said you had a small team. I said I had a team, I replied. You assumed it was small. Mom stood abruptly pacing toward the counter like she needed something to hold on to. Emma, you should have told us. I almost smiled. I did. You just didn't listen. The words landed softly, but they carried years of unspoken weight. Evan pushed back from the table, the chair legs scraping the floor. This says you have over 400 employees. Offices in Portland, San Francisco, and Singapore. That's right. He laughed under his breath, shaking his head. 400 people work for you. You've been sitting at this table every Christmas while we treated you like some hobbyist. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Mom finally turned around, tears in her eyes. We didn't believe you. Not once. I know. She came closer, voice trembling. You must have hated us for that. I shook my head. No, I stopped expecting anything from you a long time ago. The room went still again. Even Evan looked wounded by that. Laura finally spoke, her voice unsteady. You built all of that alone. Not alone, I said. I had a team. I had people who believed in the work even when my family didn't. Dad's eyes glistened, but he tried to steady his voice. Emma, he stopped, looked down at his hands. We were wrong. I told you to get a real job. You did. And you didn't listen. No, I said. I didn't. He nodded slowly as if testing the shape of that truth in his mouth. Good. The word hung there, simple but heavy. For the first time in years, I heard pride in his tone. Mom wiped her face and let out a shaky laugh. I don't even know what to say. How did we miss this? You didn't want to see it, I said softly. You had a version of me in your head, and it was easier to keep it that way. Laura looked down at her plate untouched. You're right. I'm not trying to make you feel guilty, I said. But I spent years learning to stop apologizing for being misunderstood. Evan laughed bitterly, still staring at the screen. You realize this changes everything, right? Everyone's going to call me. My coworkers, my clients, they'll all want to know how I didn't know my sister is one of the biggest tech founders in the country. That sounds like your problem, I said. He looked at me, and for a brief second the sarcasm vanished. You really built this, he said quietly. You actually did it. I did. He exhaled, long and slow. I underestimated you. You did, I agreed. Laura set her phone down. The news says you're giving an interview tomorrow morning. On Bloomberg Television. I am. What are you going to say? The truth. About us. If they ask. She hesitated. What are you going to say about us that you loved me? I said. But you didn't understand me. And that's okay. Evan laughed under his breath again. That's generous. It's honest, I said. And honesty is more than any of us managed at this table for years. Mom came closer, reaching for my hand. Her touch was light, trembling. Emma, I'm proud of you. I should have said that a long time ago. I know, I said, squeezing her hand. Dad stood suddenly, walking to the window. His reflection in the glass looked older, smaller somehow. I told you to be practical. I said technology was a fad. God, I sound like a fool. You were cautious, I said gently. Caution's not the same as foolishness. He turned back to me, his voice low. No. But blindness is. The room was quiet again. Finally, Mom spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. You've been coming to these dinners for years, letting us think we were helping you. Let us lecture you. How did you stand it? I smiled faintly. Because I knew one day I wouldn't need to explain myself. The clock ticked in the background, marking the end of a decade's worth of doubt. Evan sank back into his chair. You win, he said quietly. Whatever this was between us, you win. It wasn't a competition, I said. But thank you for finally seeing me. He nodded, eyes fixed on his plate. The TV had moved on to another segment now, something about holiday shopping trends, but none of us were watching. The tension had broken, leaving behind an unfamiliar quiet. Mom sniffed, wiping her eyes again. Next time you're bringing dessert. Something billionaire level. I laughed softly. Sure. I'll bring pie. That earned the first real smile from everyone at the table. When I finally stood to leave, Dad followed me to the door. He hesitated, then placed a hand on my shoulder. You know, he said, for what it's worth, I'm proud of you, even if I failed to show it when it mattered. I nodded. That means something, Dad. Thank you. Outside, the air was crisp and clean after the rain. The sky had cleared just enough to show a few stars. I walked to my car, the sound of my boots crunching softly against the wet gravel. When I glanced back, I saw them standing at the doorway. Mom, Dad, Evan, and Laura, still trying to reconcile the daughter and sister they thought they knew with the woman they had just seen on their television. I didn't wave. I didn't need to. As I started the engine, I caught my own reflection in the rearview mirror, calm, steady, certain. I started the engine, calm, steady, certain. Tonight, silence had done what words never could. It told the truth. The room didn't move for a full 30 seconds. The only sound was the faint hum of the television as my photo lingered on the screen, me in a navy blazer, the caption beneath it glowing like a verdict, founder and CEO of InsightWave valued at $4.2 billion. Dad's hand trembled as he picked up the remote. That's you. Yes, I said. Evan's face had drained of color. You said you had company. I do. You said it was small. You assumed it was. No one spoke. Mom's hand was still pressed to her mouth, her eyes glassy and wet. Laura's phone buzzed on the table, then Dad's, then Evan's. All at once, a chaotic symphony of incoming notifications. Evan fumbled for him, scrolling furiously. Oh my God. You're everywhere. Bloomberg, Reuters, TechCrunch. Don't answer anything, I said calmly. Reporters will call. Just let it ring. Dad blinked as though he hadn't heard me. Then his phone buzzed again. It's Bloomberg, he whispered. They want to comment. Say no, I said softly. He hesitated. They want to interview me about what it was like raising a prodigy. Mom finally spoke, her voice breaking. How long have you known this? 6 weeks. 6 weeks? Evan repeated, his voice rising. You knew for 6 weeks your company was worth billions and you didn't tell us. Would you have believed me if I had? The question hung in the air unanswered. Laura was crying now, quiet tears sliding down her face. We treated you like you were failing, she whispered. And all this time I said I was building something. I just stopped needing your approval to do it. Silence again. This time not disbelief, something heavier. Shame. Dad lowered himself into his chair. You told us technology wasn't a tool, he said, voice low. You were right. It was a world we didn't understand. I looked at him for a long moment. You gave me advice from what you knew. I just outgrew it. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly. My phone buzzed in my pocket once, twice, 3 times. I glanced at the screen. Ava, communications director. Someone leaked the announcement early. Bloomberg moved the feature up to midnight. It's live. I stood. I need to go. Now, Mom asked weakly. I have a company to manage. A crisis team is waiting. Evan exhaled sharply. Of course. The CEO leaves the family dinner for damage control. I paused at the doorway. It's not damaged. It's exposure. I walked out into the rain, their stunned faces fading behind me. The drive back to my apartment was a blur of wet asphalt and phone vibrations. Calls from journalists, emails from investors, texts from people I hadn't heard from in years, college classmates, old colleagues, even exes. Everyone suddenly remembered I existed. I ignored them all. When I got home, the apartment was quiet. Familiar. The place that had seen every version of me broke, exhausted, defiant. I turned on my laptop. The Bloomberg feature filled the screen. The headline read, "The Woman Who Made AI Human." I read every word. The interviews with clients. The revenue numbers. The photo of my team. The timeline from my first prototype to the billion-dollar valuation. And then came the paragraph that stopped me cold. When asked about her family's role in her journey, Lawson pauses. They loved me, she says carefully, but they didn't understand what I was building. To them, I was the family failure for years. They measured success by security. I measured it by possibility. I sat back. The words didn't sting. They didn't even feel triumphant. They just felt true. My phone buzzed again. Mom, we saw everything. I don't know what to say except I'm proud of you. I should have said it sooner. Evan, I deserve every word in that article. I'm sorry. Dad. You were generous in how you spoke of us. More than we deserved. I didn't reply. Not out of anger, out of peace. For years I had imagined this moment, me finally vindicated, finally seen. I thought it would feel like revenge. It didn't. It felt like a release. Outside the city shimmered under the rain, neon lights blurring into gold. Somewhere out there, another version of me was still sitting in the dark, coding through the noise, trying to prove she was real. I wanted to tell her, you don't need them to see you. Build it anyway. I closed the laptop, leaning back. Tonight it didn't feel like revenge. It felt like the quiet, necessary work of release. The sun rose gray over Portland, the kind of cold, colorless light that made everything feel temporary. I hadn't really slept, just drifted in and out of shallow rest between vibrations of my phone. When I finally opened my eyes, it was 6:48 a.m. My head ached. My coffee had gone cold and my name was everywhere. The Bloomberg interview aired at 7. I didn't watch it at first. I told myself it didn't matter. I'd already lived every word I said. But curiosity got the better of me. I turned on the TV, and there I was, sitting across from Harper Reid, hair neat, voice calm, eyes too steady for someone who'd spent years hiding. Emma Lawson, founder and CEO of InsightWave, the anchor said. Her company's valuation just crossed $4 billion, making her one of the youngest self-made billionaires in tech. There was that word again, self-made. It sounded powerful, but it wasn't the truth. No one is self-made. You build yourself out of the people who doubted you, the ones who helped you, the ones who tried to stop you. I was built by every argument, every dismissal, every dinner where I'd swallowed my words instead of spitting them back. The segment showed footage of our headquarters employees laughing in the cafeteria, engineers scribbling equations on whiteboards. The voiceover called me visionary trailblazer innovator. I muted it halfway through. At 7:15, my phone rang again. Mom. I hesitated before answering. Hi. She sounded out of breath like she'd been crying. Emma, we just watched the interview. All of us. You were... She stopped to steady herself. You were incredible. Thank you, I said softly. Your father, he's been quiet all morning. I think it's finally hitting him. How much he didn't see. That's okay, I said. He saw what he was capable of seeing. There was silence on the line. Then her voice small and trembling. I don't know how to make this right. I closed my eyes. You don't have to. Just don't pretend anymore. Pretend that you didn't doubt me, or that it didn't matter, she sniffed. I won't, I promise. When I hung up, my chest felt both heavier and lighter. The truth had weight, but it also cleared the air. By 8 a.m., my phone was melting with notifications again. My assistant Julia texted press requests nonstop. CNN, NPR, TechCrunch. Do you want me to filter or forward filter everything but investors and major outlets? I replied. And tell the team to stick to prepared statements. No interviews until next week. A few seconds later, she replied with a thumbs-up emoji. I opened my inbox again. Over 700 unread messages. But one caught my attention. Subject, you made us proud. It was from Ben, my head of engineering. Emma. I just wanted to say thank you. You never asked for blind loyalty, just belief in the work. Watching you on TV this morning reminded me why we built this. You didn't just prove the world wrong, you proved to all of us that quiet leadership can be loud when it needs to be. I smiled. Ben had been with me since the first funding round back when office meant 2 laptops and a coffee table. His words meant more than any headline. The day rolled on fast. Calls with investors, emails from reporters, a virtual meeting with my leadership team. The atmosphere was electric, a mix of pride and panic. Success, I'd learned, came with its own kind of chaos. Emma Julia said during our Zoom meeting, her voice calm but eyes wide, we're getting hundreds of partnership requests. Everyone wants to integrate our predictive tech. Amazon, Walmart, even Tesla. Sort them, I said. We prioritize compatibility, not celebrity. Ben laughed. Spoken like someone who's been underestimated too long. He was right. The world was finally listening, and I had to make sure the noise didn't drown out the mission. By noon, my face was plastered across every business news homepage. I saw it in the cafe near my building on strangers' phones, even in the reflection of a passing bus. Each time it startled me, that same photo, the same confident smile. It was like watching a version of myself I hadn't met yet. At 12:47, Evan called. I let it ring twice before answering. Emma, he said quietly, you really did it. I didn't know how to respond. Yeah. I owe you an apology. Not just for last night, for years. You already sent one, I said. This one's different. His voice cracked slightly. I used to think success had one definition, a title, a salary, an office view. You didn't fit that box, so I assumed you were failing. But maybe I was just scared of anything that didn't look like me. That made me pause. You weren't scared, I said gently. You were conditioned. So was I. He exhaled slowly. Maybe. But you unlearned it first. Maybe I repeated. He was quiet for a while. If it means anything, I'm proud of you. Not the number, not the valuation. You. Thank you, I said softly. When the call ended, I realized my hands were shaking. Forgiveness was supposed to feel freeing, but it also felt fragile, like holding something that could break if you breathed too hard. At 2 p.m., Julia messaged again. You should see this. She sent a link to a Forbes article. The quiet genius who outsmarted Silicon Valley. I skimmed it. Half admiration, half analysis. But one line stood out. Lawson's story isn't about revenge. It's about reclamation, the act of taking back what others convinced her she didn't deserve. For the first time all day, I smiled a real one. By evening, exhaustion hit me like gravity. I turned off every screen, every device, and walked outside. The city smelled like rain and winter. Somewhere a street musician played a soft melody on a violin, notes curling through the air like smoke. I stopped by a coffee shop I used to frequent when I was broke. Same chipped tables, same kind barista. He didn't recognize me, and that felt strangely comforting. I ordered a cappuccino and sat by the window watching the light fade. Across the street, a father and daughter walked hand in hand, her small backpack bouncing with each step. She was talking excitedly about something, probably a school project. The father listened, nodding, smiling. For a fleeting second, I wished I'd had that someone who'd listened when I first started talking about ideas too big for the dinner table. But maybe the lack of it was what forced me to become who I was now. When I got home, the city skyline glowed like a circuit board. My reflection in the window looked steady, grounded, ready. Tomorrow there will be more interviews, more meetings, more noise. But tonight there was only silence. The same silence that had once felt like exile now transformed into peace. I took one last look at the blinking lights below and whispered to the empty room. They finally heard me. And for the first time, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like an arrival. By mid-afternoon, my phone had become a living thing, buzzing, lighting up, demanding attention. Every news outlet, every investor, every person I'd ever met wanted a quote, a statement, a reaction. My assistant texted, "You're officially viral." It sounded absurd even now. Viral. Like success was a fever. I stood by the window of my office, the real one, not the one-bedroom apartment that started it all. 42 stories above the city, the skyline glittered under a sharp winter sun. From here, Portland looked like a possibility. I should have felt proud. But all I could think about was the dinner table, my brother's stunned face, my father's silence, my mother's tears. In less than 12 hours, everything had shifted. The same family that used to roll their eyes when I said machine learning was now being hounded by reporters. My phone buzzed again, this time a message from my communications director, Ava. "Emma, heads up, your family's house is surrounded by journalists. We've already issued a statement asking for privacy, but it's spreading fast. Local news picked it up. Do you want us to send security?" I closed my eyes. Jesus. The phone rang again almost immediately. "Mom." "Emma," she said before I could even say hello. "They're outside. There are people with cameras in the driveway." "I know," I said softly. "Ava told me. I'm sending someone to help." "I don't need help," she said, her voice trembling. "I just need it to stop. I'm sorry, Mom. It'll calm down in a few days. Just don't talk to anyone, okay?" "Your father already told them no comment," she said. But one man kept shouting questions. He asked if you were always this ambitious, if we saw it coming. I didn't know what to say. "You don't have to say anything," I told her. "But what if they twist the story?" "They already are," I said quietly. After I hung up, I stood in the middle of my office staring at the skyline without really seeing it. For years, all I'd wanted was to be taken seriously. Now the world was listening and it was too loud to breathe. Ben knocked on my open door. "You okay?" I turned. He was holding 2 coffees as if he knew I hadn't eaten since yesterday. "I'm fine," I said automatically. He gave me a look. "You're a terrible liar." I took the coffee from him anyway. "Thanks." He sat across from me, elbows resting on his knees. "We've got reporters camping outside the building, too. One tried to follow me into the elevator." I groaned. "Fantastic." "They'll move on," he said. "News cycles are short. You'll be yesterday's miracle by next week." I smiled faintly. "You always know how to make a girl feel special." He chuckled, then leaned back. "You know, I've worked with a lot of founders. Most of them crumble when this kind of spotlight hits. You're still standing." I shrugged. "Standing's the easy part. Staying human, that's hard." He nodded slowly like he understood more than I'd said. If you need me to handle the press calls, I've got it covered. Focus on breathing. After he left, I opened my email again. Another flood. Subject feature request. 60 minutes. Subject conference keynote invitation. World AI Forum. Subject congratulations from the governor's office. But the one that caught my eye came from Rachel Morrison, my sister-in-law. Emma, I don't know if this is appropriate, but I wanted to say I've been thinking about that dinner. I've replayed it in my head all night. You handled it with such grace. I wish I'd defended you sooner. Please know at least now I do see you. I read it twice before closing my laptop. Grace. That word felt heavy. Grace wasn't what I'd felt at that table, it was controlled, cold, and deliberate. Grace came after. By late afternoon, my investor call began. Sequoia SoftBank and Horizon Capital. The people who now owned significant pieces of my dream. Emma, one of them, said the coverage has been phenomenal. Your story's driving traffic interest recruitment. You're the face of AI innovation now. Congratulations. Thank you, I said, forcing a smile. But another voice cut in, this also raises expectations. The next 6 months will define your legacy. The market will expect performance to match the press. Can you deliver that? I met the camera with steady eyes. We've been delivering it for years. The press just caught up. That silenced them for a moment. Then came nods and polite laughter. When the call ended, I sat back, the smile fading. They weren't wrong, the pressure was real now. Before I'd been underestimated. Now I couldn't afford to fail. At 6 p.m., as the office emptied, I walked out into the freezing air. Across the street, someone held up a phone filming. A reporter, maybe, or just a stranger who recognized me. Either way, I kept walking. The attention followed me like a shadow I couldn't shake. By the time I got home, the hallway outside my apartment was quiet. But when I opened the door, I froze. My entire family was sitting in the living room. Mom, Dad, Evan, Laura. Before you say anything, Mom started, "We know you're busy, but we needed to come." I blinked. "How did you even get in?" "Your doorman," Evan said. "Apparently we look trustworthy." I dropped my bag on the counter. "What's going on?" "We wanted to apologize," Laura said quickly. "Again, for everything. But more than that, we wanted to understand." "Understand what?" "How you did it," Dad said simply. "How you built all this while we weren't looking." His voice wasn't defensive anymore. Just tired. I leaned against the counter. One line of code at a time. Evan half smiled. "You make it sound easy." "It wasn't," I said. "But it was necessary." They exchanged glances, unsure how to continue. Finally, Mom stood and crossed the room. She looked older than I remembered, softer, smaller. "We can't undo the years we made you feel small. But we can start listening now if you'll let us." I studied her face, the sincerity there. For a moment, the weight I'd carried for years loosened just a little. "Listening would be a good start," I said. We sat together, awkward at first, then quieter, calmer. They asked real questions this time about my work, my team, my vision. I answered not with pride, but with honesty. For the first time in years, the silence between us wasn't heavy. It was healing. When they finally left, the apartment felt different, not empty, but open. I walked to the window, the city lights flickering against the glass. Down below, life moved on taxis, pedestrians, the hum of something constant and unbothered. The world had changed overnight. But somehow, standing there, I realized I hadn't. I was still the same woman who had sat alone with a laptop and a dream, the same woman they'd once overlooked. Only now they were finally catching up. I was the same woman they'd overlooked. But now they knew the cost of that oversight, and they had just shown up on my doorstep asking to be let in. The knock came earlier than I expected, barely 10 in the morning. I'd been up since 6, answering investor emails, reviewing projections, half listening to my own interview replaying on TV. The city outside was still waking up, gray fog curling around the buildings like smoke. When I opened the door, my entire family stood there again. Mom, Dad, Evan, Laura. They looked hesitant this time, like a group rehearsing an apology they weren't sure would land. Mom held a casserole dish because of course she did. It was her default offering for any kind of emotional emergency. "We know you're busy," she said quickly. "We know you probably don't want company, but we needed to come." I stepped aside. "Come in." They filed in slowly, eyes darting around my apartment as if stepping into another world. I saw them take in the small details, the neatly stacked books, the 2 monitors on my desk, the photo of my original team on the shelf. "This is where it all started?" Dad asked quietly. I nodded. Every line of code, every late night, every pitch deck that got rejected. Right here. He looked around again like he was seeing it for the first time. "It's smaller than I imagined." "That's kind of the point," I said. "It had to fit my world before it could change it." Evan laughed softly, though not mockingly this time. "You really built a $4 billion company from a 1-bedroom apartment." "Technically," I said, "it was worth 4.2. He smiled faintly, still correcting me. We all sat down in the living room. The casserole sat untouched between us. For a while, no one spoke. The silence wasn't hostile anymore, just careful. Finally, Laura broke it. "I read the entire Bloomberg feature 3 times. You were kind about us. Kinder than we deserved." "I wasn't trying to be kind," I said. "I was trying to be fair." Mom's eyes filled again. "You said we loved you but didn't understand you. That we supported you in the way we knew how." "That wasn't enough, was it?" I hesitated, then said quietly, "No. But I think you meant well. You just didn't believe that what I was doing counted as real." "We were wrong," Dad said immediately, "completely wrong." Evan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "It wasn't just that we didn't believe in you, Emma. I think part of us was jealous. You had the courage to do something we didn't. We played it safe and you didn't. That caught me off guard." "Jealous." He nodded. "Yeah. You didn't need anyone's approval. You just went for it. I've spent my whole life trying to impress people who already thought they understood me. You were the only one who walked away from that." Laura nodded slowly. "He's right. You weren't the family failure. You were the family risk-taker. We just didn't know how to process that." Mom reached across the table and took my hand. "We thought we were protecting you. From disappointment, from embarrassment. But really we were protecting ourselves from being wrong." Her voice cracked on the last word. I swallowed hard. "You weren't bad parents. Just limited by your own story." Dad looked down, then met my eyes. "We can't undo those years. But we can learn now. If you'll let us." For a moment no one said anything. The only sound was the faint hum of my refrigerator. I looked at each of them, their faces lined with shame, humility, and something softer curiosity. "Okay," I said finally. "You can learn." Mom exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. Evan leaned back, relief flickering across his face. "You don't know how much that means." "I think I do," I said. We spent the next hour talking not about money or success or press releases, but about everything before that. The years they'd missed. The small milestones that had mattered only to me. The first time my prototype worked. The first time I made payroll. The first time someone told me I was out of my depth and I did it anyway. They listened. Really listened. Not with polite nods, but with questions with genuine interest. For the first time, I wasn't defending my dream, I was sharing it. At one point, Dad stood and walked to the corner of the room where my old desk still sat. It was scratch-scuffed and half covered with old notebooks. "This," he said quietly, "is where you built an empire." I smiled. "Empire's a stretch." "Not really," he said. "You changed how people think about data, about intelligence, about what's possible. I used to tell you to get a real job. You built one instead." The way he said it, steady proud, was something I'd wanted to hear my entire life. Mom stood wiping her eyes. "I brought lunch," she said, her voice breaking. "I know you probably eat better things now, but I made your favorite. Chicken and spinach casserole." "I love that," I said. "Let's eat." We gathered around my small kitchen table, the one I'd eaten takeout at for years while coding through the night. It felt surreal to have them there laughing softly, asking questions, tasting the food that had once been my comfort when their approval wasn't. Halfway through lunch, Mom said, "You know the reporter asked your father if we saw this coming. He said no, but he told her he wished he had." I smiled. "That's okay. Some stories are better when they surprise you." Evan laughed quietly. "Well, you definitely surprised us. You blindsided us, actually." "I know," I said, "and I don't regret it." When they finally stood to leave, Mom hugged me tightly, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "I'm proud of you, sweetheart. I should have said it years ago." "You're saying it now," I whispered. "That's what matters." Dad shook my hand like he was meeting me for the first time. "You did it without us," he said. "But I'd like to think we can be part of what comes next." I smiled faintly. "Maybe. We'll see." Evan lingered by the door, hesitant. "Can I ask you one more thing?" "Sure." "How do you do it?" he said. "How do you carry so much pressure without breaking?" I thought for a second. "I did break," I said. "More than once. I just learned how to rebuild quietly." He nodded, eyes glistening. "That's strength." After they left, I stood in the quiet again, the faint smell of casserole still hanging in the air. My apartment looked the same, but everything felt different. For years, this space had been my sanctuary, a place where I didn't have to explain myself. Now, for the first time, it had been a bridge. I walked to the window and looked out at the skyline. Somewhere in that city, my team was working, investors were celebrating, the world was moving. But here in this little apartment, something far more important had happened. I realized something far more important had happened. For the first time, my family had seen me, not the billion-dollar founder, but just me. And that was enough. By the next morning, the chaos had calmed. The cameras were gone from my parents' driveway. The headlines had shifted to some other rising startup, and the city felt strangely still. I sat at my desk, coffee cooling beside me, rereading the final paragraph of the Bloomberg feature one more time. When asked what advice she would give to aspiring founders whose families don't support them, Emma Lawson paused before answering, "Build it anyway. Build it because you believe in it, not because anyone else does. And one day, either they'll understand or they won't. But either way, you'll have built something extraordinary." I stared at those words, my own words, feeling their truth settle differently now. I hadn't realized how much of that quote had come from pain until I saw it printed in 1,000 places. The doorbell rang around 10. For a second, I thought it was a delivery. When I opened the door, it was Ava, my communications director, phone in hand, an expression equal parts panic and pride. "You're trending again," she said, walking in before I could answer. "That quote, 'Build it anyway,' it's everywhere. Twitter, LinkedIn, Reddit. It's become a slogan." "A slogan?" she nodded. "They're calling it the Lawson line. It's being used by entrepreneurs, artists, students, anyone who's ever been dismissed. You've started a movement, Emma." I leaned against the counter, half in disbelief. "A movement? Yeah. You've become the face of perseverance. The family failure who built a global empire. You're being booked for panels, podcasts, conferences." I smiled faintly. "They love a story with a moral, don't they?" Ava tilted her head. "This one's earned. The world sees you now." But the funny thing was, I didn't crave that anymore. Being seen wasn't the goal. Being understood was. When Ava left, I sat by the window watching the fog burn off the river. Somewhere in the distance, a ferry horn echoed a sound that always made me feel small and grounded at once. I thought about all the versions of myself I'd been. The girl was coding on her bedroom floor while her brother mocked her. The woman pretending not to care when her father called her dream a hobby. The founder who'd spent every ounce of energy proving she was real. Now the world calls me visionary. But all I felt was tired. My phone buzzed again. "Evan." "Hey," he said when I answered. His voice was gentler now, stripped of its old sharpness. "Mom told me you're speaking at the Innovation Summit next week." "Yeah," I said. "Keynote spot. Big deal." He hesitated. "You're going to talk about us, aren't you?" I smiled faintly. "You're part of the story. But don't worry, I'm not going to humiliate anyone. I know, he said. You never did. That's what makes it worse. We were quiet for a moment. Then he added, I watched that interview again this morning. You looked calm, like none of it touched you, but I know it did. It did, I admitted. It still does. Then how do you do it? I remember why I started, I said simply. And I try not to confuse being heard with being healed. Evan sighed. That's deep. It's true. He chuckled softly. You've gotten wiser since we stopped listening. After we hung up, I looked around my apartment again. The same walls, the same desk, the same view, but it all felt lighter now. The tension that used to live here was gone. Around noon, I headed downtown for a board meeting. The office buzzed with quiet pride when I walked in. My employees tried to play it cool, but I caught the glances, the small smiles, the shared sense of vindication. Ben was waiting in the conference room, already reviewing the new quarterly data. We're up 23% in new enterprise clients, he said, sliding a chart across the table. The Bloomberg effect is real. Good, I said, scanning the numbers, but let's make sure growth doesn't outpace the people. No scaling at the expense of culture. He nodded. You're still the same Emma. Press didn't change you. I looked at him. It didn't need to. I already knew who I was. The meeting lasted 2 hours, but my mind kept drifting back to the apartment, to my family's visit, to the look on my mother's face when she finally said, I'm proud of you. Afterward, I walked home instead of taking a car. The city air was crisp, the streets humming softly with life. I passed a bookstore, and in the window there it was a magazine featuring my face. The headline read, Emma Lawson, the woman who believed before anyone else did. I almost laughed. Belief had been both my weapon and my wound. Back home, I brewed tea and sat on the couch, flipping through the printed feature again. Halfway through, my phone pinged another text from Mom. We're having dinner Sunday. No agenda, no questions, just family. You can say no if you need space. I smiled and typed back, I'll be there. That night, the city lights shimmered through my window, scattering across the floor like fragments of everything I'd built. For years, I thought revenge was the quietest kind of success, the sweet satisfaction of proving everyone wrong. But sitting there, I realized it wasn't revenge at all. It was released. Release from the need to justify. Release from the constant ache to be validated. Release from the invisible version of myself my family once saw. I didn't want them to feel sorry anymore. I wanted them to see that belief. Real belief didn't start with applause. It started in silence. The same silence that had once made me feel small had become the space where I'd built everything that mattered. At midnight, I turned off my phone, closed my laptop, and stood at the window one last time. Down below, the river glowed faintly under the streetlights. Tomorrow, there will be meetings, headlines, and noise. But tonight, there was peace. The world could keep the noise. Tonight, I needed the quiet ripple that reminded me I didn't need their applause. I had already built it anyway. The second invitation came on a Thursday afternoon, almost a month after everything blew up. No group chat this time, no casual tone, just a single text from Mom. Dinner Sunday, just us. No guests, no cameras. Come if you can. If you can't, we understand. I stared at it for a long time. Before Bloomberg, before the $4.2 billion, before my name became a headline, I would have seen that as an obligation. Guilt dinner, a performance. Now it felt like something else. A reach, a risk. A door cracked open, not swung wide. I typed, deleted, retyped. Finally, I'll be there. No confetti, no emojis. Just good. Love you. Sunday came cold and clear, the kind of winter evening where the air bites your lungs, but the sky looks clean. I drove the same Subaru I'd had when InsightWave was nothing but a folder on my desktop. I could have bought something else. Never felt the need. This car knew the whole story. Their street was quiet. No reporters, no cars blocking the driveway. Just the house I grew up in, porch light, glowing front window lit. The first time I'd walked up to this door after the Bloomberg segment, My chest had felt like armor and open wound at once. This time it just felt unsettled. Evan opened the door before I knocked. He looked tired, softer. No smug grin, no rehearsed jokes. Just a crooked half smile. "Hey," he said. "You came." "You invited," I said. He stepped aside. "Good point. Come in." The house smelled like roasted vegetables, garlic, and something warm in the oven. Familiar. Comforting. Painful. Mom appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. "There you are," she breathed like she'd been holding it. "Hi, sweetheart." "Hi, Mom." Dad emerged from the dining room, not with his usual commanding presence, but slower, deliberate. "Emma." "Dad." We stood there for a second, all four of us in the entryway, the weight of years hanging between us. No one knew who should move first. Mom broke the spell. "Let's sit. The food's ready." The table looked exactly the same as it had the night everything changed. Same plates, same silverware, same candles. But there were no side comments about careers, no half-shouted remarks about real jobs, no tension hiding behind politeness. Just quiet. Too quiet. We passed dishes around. Roasted chicken, baked squash salad. Small talk floated for a few minutes. Weather traffic, a neighbor who'd painted their house a terrible color. I watched them try to act normal. It didn't fit anymore. Finally, Laura, who'd come straight from work, blazer off, hair slightly undone, set down her fork. "We asked you here because we owe you more than congratulations," she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands weren't. I glanced between them. "Okay." Evan exhaled, leaning back slightly. "I was an ass," he said. "For years." "Accurate," I said. He huffed out a humorless laugh. "Fair. I thought I knew what success looked like. I thought if you weren't climbing a ladder that everyone recognized, you weren't going anywhere. So when you chose something I didn't understand, I made fun of it instead of asking real questions. That's on me." I held his gaze. "Yes, it is." He didn't flinch. "I'm sorry." The words didn't land like a fic. They landed like a start. Dad cleared his throat. "I told you to be careful," he said. "Told you to pick something stable. Thought I was protecting you. Truth is, I was afraid. Afraid you'd fail. Afraid I'd have to watch." He paused. "Then I watched you succeed and still treated you like you hadn't." I didn't rush to soothe him. I was done cushioning the truth. "You hurt me," I said quietly. "All of you. I stopped telling you things because it was easier than hearing you talk about my life like it was a phase." Mom's eyes filled. "I know," she whispered. "And that's what's been killing me. You were building this entire universe and we left you alone in it. You weren't obligated to believe in me," I said. "But you also weren't obligated to tear it down." Evan looked down. Laura blinked hard, swallowing. Laura spoke next, voice low. "I used to brag about being a successful sister, the one with the respectable career. Then one of the partners forwarded your interview and said, 'You never mentioned your sister was Emma Lawson.' And I realized I hadn't, because I didn't think you counted." She looked up at me. "That's ugly. But it's the truth. I'm sorry too." The honesty stung, but there was something clean about it. For once, nobody was dressing their guilt in excuses. "I spent a long time," I said slowly, "thinking that when you finally saw what I built, it would feel like winning, like revenge." And Dad asked quietly. "It didn't," I said. "It just felt late." Mom reached across the table, not grabbing, just offering. "We can't go back," she said. "We can't rewind to when you were 23 and scared and alone and make it right. But we're here now. We're listening now, if you'll let us." I looked at her hand, then at their faces. Tired, humbled, trying. "I don't know how to just flip that switch," I said. "Forgiveness isn't a press release. It's not instant." "You don't owe us that," Dad said. "But we're going to keep showing up," Evan added. "Even if you slam the door." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "I'm not going to slam the door." For a while we just sat there. No one rushed to fill the silence. It wasn't heavy the way it used to be. It felt like sitting in a room that had finally been aired out. Mom broke it with a wobbly laugh. You know what's ironic? What I asked. We spent years saying you needed something stable, she said. Turns out you built the most stable thing in this family. Evan snorted. Emotionally and financially. I cracked a smile. Let's not do the math. They laughed. And this time it wasn't at me. It was with me. As the evening went on, the conversation shifted. They asked about InsightWave and not in a condescending way. How big is your team now? Laura asked. Over 400, I said. What's the hardest part? Dad asked. Knowing when to say no, I replied. To deals to press to people who only like me now that the world does. Mom's eyes softened. We don't want to be those people. Then don't, I said simply. By the time I stood to leave, we weren't fixed. But we weren't broken in the same way either. At the door, Dad walked me out. The night was cold, the sky clear. He looked smaller than he used to, or maybe I was finally standing at my full height. You don't owe us anything, he said. Not explanations, not access, not a seat at your table just because we share your name. I know, I said. I hope, he added carefully, that one day you'll come here and it won't feel like a test. Just dinner. I studied his face, lined honest, uncertain. Maybe one day, I said. We're closer than we were. He nodded. Drive safe, Emma. Evan stepped into the doorway behind him, lifting a hand. Text when you get home. I smirked. Since when do you worry about that? Since I realized my little sister runs a multi-billion-dollar operation and still refuses to buy a decent car, he said. I laughed for real this time. Good night, Evan. The Subaru started on the first try engine, humming like it always did. As I pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. They were still standing in the doorway watching me go, not as judges, not as skeptics, just as people trying to earn a second chance. I wasn't driving away from them anymore. I was driving forward on my terms. I had opened the door to them, but the terms of the meeting were finally mine. The studio lights were blinding even through the faint haze of nerves that clung to the back of my throat. Cameras hummed quietly. Crew members moved with the precision of ritual, and across from me sat the anchor from Bloomberg Live, crisp in a navy suit, smiling, that practiced camera-ready smile. 3 minutes to air, a producer called. Someone dabbed powder on my face. My reflection in the monitor looked calm, composed, professional, but inside my pulse thrummed like static. Emma, the anchor said, leaning forward. This segment's going global. Millions will watch. Just be yourself. That's what made people fall in love with your story. I nodded. Myself. Got it. The countdown began. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good morning, and welcome back to Bloomberg Live. The anchor began smoothly. Today we're speaking with Emma Lawson, founder and CEO of InsightWave, the AI analytics company now valued at $4.2 billion. Emma, thank you for joining us. Thank you for having me, he smiled. Your story has captivated people around the world. The girl who built a global company from a small apartment while everyone, including her own family, doubted her. How does it feel to go from underestimated to unstoppable? It was a question designed for sound bites, but I didn't want to give one. It feels, I said slowly, like proof that belief doesn't need an audience. You don't have to be seen to build something real. Beautifully said. He paused, shuffling his notes. In your viral quote, you said, "Build it anyway. It's inspired millions online." What did you mean by that? I took a breath. When you're chasing something no one else understands, you'll be told it's unrealistic. You'll be laughed at. You'll feel invisible. Build it anyway. Because waiting for permission means you'll never start. He nodded thoughtfully. And now your company's one of the fastest growing AI firms in the world. But let's talk about what most people don't see, the sacrifices. What did it really take to get here? I hesitated for a moment. The truth wasn't glamorous. It took missing birthdays, losing relationships, doubting myself more times than I can count. But it also gave me purpose. I learned that loneliness isn't always failure. It's the space where you learn who you are. Something flickered in the anchor's eyes. Interest, maybe respect. Do you think your family sees that now? That question hit differently. I met his gaze. They do, I said softly. It just took them a little while to catch up. The anchor smiled. And what about you? Have you forgiven them? I thought about Mom's teary hug, Dad's awkward pride, Evan's quiet apology. Yes, I said finally. Because forgiveness isn't about rewriting what happened, it's about freeing yourself to move forward. The control room gave a silent thumbs up. The interview went well. Still, I could feel the weight of every word, every pause. He leaned closer. Emma, one last question. After everything, after proving everyone wrong, what comes next? The light seemed to soften, then the hum of the studio fading. I smiled, not rehearsed, but real. What's next isn't about proving anything. It's about building things that matter for people who need them. My goal isn't to be the most powerful person in the room. It's to make rooms where more people belong. Perfect, he said as the red light went off. That's our closer. Thank you, Emma. The cameras powered down. Crew members began resetting equipment. The producer handed me a bottle of water. That was brilliant, she said. You made $1 billion company sound human. I laughed lightly. That's the goal. Outside, the city felt sharp and alive. I pulled my coat tight, walking down the quiet street, my breath clouding in the cold air. My phone buzzed, Mom. We watched. You were perfect. Then another from Evan, that last line about making rooms where more people belong. That's the best thing you've ever said. And finally from Dad. You made me proud in front of every neighbor who ever told me you'd grow out of the tech thing. Thank you for proving them wrong, and me too. I stopped at a crosswalk, the messages glowing on my screen, and for once I didn't feel the need to reply right away. Some silences didn't need filling. At the cafe across the street, a young woman with a laptop caught my eye. She was typing furiously, earbuds in a look of fierce focus on her face. I saw myself in her, the hunger, the hope, the quiet rebellion. As I passed, she looked up and froze. Recognition flickered across her face. I smiled. Keep going, I said before she could finish. Whatever you're building, build it anyway. Her mouth curved into a grin. I will. Walking back to my office, I realized that something had shifted inside me. For years, I'd been fueled by defiance, by the need to be seen, to be right, to be enough. But standing there under the gray winter sky, I understood something new. I didn't build this to prove anyone wrong. I built it to prove what was possible. When I reached my office, the team was waiting, huddled around a monitor streaming the interview replay. They clapped when I walked in, cheering, laughing eyes bright with pride. Boss Ben said, grinning, the internet's obsessed with you again. I laughed. Let them be. We've got work to do. As they returned to their desks, the hum of the office filled the air, the sound of collaboration, creativity, momentum. My empire not of marble or gold, but of minds and ideas. I sat at my desk, the same one from years ago, now polished and placed in the corner of my sleek new office. On it sat the small faded USB drive labeled Project Horizon. I turned it over in my hand, smiling. The journey that started here wasn't about money validation or even revenge. It was about believing in something before the world did and having the patience to wait for it to catch up. And maybe tonight they'd read my words, hear my voice, and whisper to themselves, build it anyway. It had been a year since everything changed. Seattle was quiet that December evening, the city wrapped in its usual mist and soft strings of holiday lights. My apartment was different now, bigger, brighter, but still simple. A single candle burned beside my desk next to a stack of printed pages bound together with a thin blue ribbon. Title Building in Silence. How to Believe When No One Does. I ran a hand over the cover. The publisher wanted final edits before the new year. The speaking tour was already booked. A part of me still couldn't believe it, me writing a book not about algorithms or analytics, but about faith. The kind you build from the inside out. My phone buzzer. Mom, Christmas dinner tonight. 6 o'clock. No pressure, but we'd love to see you. For a moment I just looked at it. The same words that used to twist my stomach now warmed me. No pressure. Love to see you. That was new. I typed back, "I'll come." Outside, flakes of snow began to fall slow, deliberate, as if the sky was thinking. I put on my coat, grabbed the manuscript, and slipped it into my bag. When I pulled up to the house, the porch light was still the same soft yellow it had always been. The windows glowed with the kind of warmth that used to make me feel like an outsider looking in. Tonight, it felt like a doorway. Mom opened the door before I could knock. Her eyes brightened instantly. "You came?" she said, voice thick with joy. "I said I would." She pulled me into a hug that smelled like cinnamon and laundry detergent. "You look good. So do you." Evan appeared from the kitchen, an apron tied haphazardly around his suit. "I cooked," he said proudly. "Well supervised." "You supervising anyone in a kitchen is already progress," I teased. He grinned. "Touché." Dad was setting the table when I walked in. He looked up and smiled, not the tentative kind from before, but the easy kind that reaches the eyes. "Emma," he said, "we saved you a seat." The table was beautifully simple roasted vegetables. Bread still warm, Mom's apple pie cooling on the counter. No small talk about jobs or money. Just laughter that didn't require translation. Halfway through dinner, Laura raised her glass. To Emma, she said, "For teaching us that success doesn't always look like what we were taught to chase." I shook my head. "No speeches." "Too late," Evan said, lifting his own glass. "To our sister, the author." Dad's eyes softened. "You found your voice, Emma." It took me too long to hear it. The words landed quietly but fully, like something that had been waiting years to be said. "Thank you," I said simply. Mom smiled, reaching for another slice of pie. "I pre-ordered 10 copies of your book, by the way. Your father said that was excessive." "I said it was supportive," Dad corrected. Evan laughed. "Same thing in this family." We all laughed, and it felt real. No pretense, no residue of old pain. Just a family trying again. When I stood to leave later that night, Evan stopped me at the door and handed me a small wrapped box. "It's from all of us," he said. Inside was a sleek gold USB drive. "It's empty," he said quickly. "I figured, in case you want to build something new." I looked at it for a long moment, then smiled. I already am. Outside, the air was cold but kind. I walked to my car, the snow crunching softly under my boots. The night was still, the sky low and glowing. When I got home, I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat at my desk, the city glittering outside my window. I opened my laptop, the cursor blinking at the top of a blank page. I began to type. Sometimes the people closest to you are the last to see you. That doesn't mean you stop shining. You keep building. You keep believing. You keep loving the version of yourself that never stopped trying. I paused, looking out at the skyline. The city lights looked like constellations, familiar, steady mine. For years, I'd been building something for the world to see. Now I was building something for myself. The hum of the heater filled the room. Snow drifted against the window. I didn't need to prove anything at all. I was home, and the greatest gift of success was the peace that arrived inside.